Hey guys, Fred here. So over the past 2 weeks, we've been in this series called Popular, where we've been talking a lot about influence. And so today we're actually going to continue that series. But before we dive in, I want you guys to just check out this video.
Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy.
Yeah, straight. Ready for this?
Without a doubt, I think that we can all agree that embarrassing moments can be absolutely hilarious. We as humans just love watching videos like that. And even when we see things in public, things like people falling down in public, or someone saying the wrong thing during a speech, or when someone trips in front of a room full of people, we just want to laugh. We can't help it. It's just what we do in our human nature. There's something about it that's just so funny. Except for when it happens to us, right? You know, if someone else is known as the person that is constantly tripping, then it's hilarious. But when it's us that is known as the person that is constantly tripping, it's not so funny. And sometimes when embarrassing stuff happens to us, it sticks with us. If you trip going across the stage for a ceremony, then you're known as the person who just tripped at that ceremony. It sticks with you. It's what you're known for. Whether it happens at school, whether it happens out in public with our friends, whether it happens at church, there will always be an incident that just sticks with us and changes or shapes people's opinions about us. In a way, our ability to influence other people works the exact same. Remember when we talked about influence the first time? We learned that influence is the ability to have an effect on somebody else, to impact the things like their behavior or their thoughts or even their choices. Now, while we have a tendency to believe that something like influence is reserved for the people who are known, or the people who are popular, or the people who are kind of a big deal, what we learned is that the reality is that we all have the potential to influence other people, whether it be for the better or for the worse. And because of that, we all have the same exact potential to lose that influence. Maybe you know someone right now who used to have a lot of influence. They were known for being friendly and funny and a person who tried to make genuinely good choices. But then they got caught up. Whether it was drinking at a party, or cheating on a test, or spreading a nasty rumor about a friend, whatever it was, just like that, their influence was gone. And now, instead of being known for all the good things that they did at one point, they're simply known for that big, bad decision that they made. Now, maybe you know this is true because it's happened to you. You were that kid who showed up every week to church, who always got straight A's, who had lots of friends, who was a leader on your team, but you made one bad decision. One moment, one choice, one experience, and suddenly your reputation completely changed. Now people look at you and only see that bad decision. And because of that, maybe you feel like you can't show up to church, or maybe you don't want to go to school, or maybe you're avoiding your team, or maybe you're even avoiding spending time with your friends. But here's the deal. Those big decisions, those things that we do in the open that are obviously not good choices, they definitely have the power to cost us our influence. But there's also something else that has the ability to cost us our influence, and that's those small, more secret things that we do that don't seem like a big deal at the time. Maybe it's the harsh way that you speak to your siblings, or the way that you yell at your teammates in the locker room. Maybe it's the secrets that you share about your friends when they're not around. the person you're dating that you know isn't good for you, the way you look down on or judge other people. All of these things that you may see as small can add up over time. And so the more that you do them, the more likely you are to become known as someone who does do them. And the more likely you are to lose the influence that you have over the people around you. And when we put it this way, it sounds like a real bummer. You make bad choices, whether big or small, and just like that, your influence is gone. Your ability to be anyone other than a person who makes bad choices is over. You're stuck. And you'll never be able to get back to the way things used to be. But here's the good news. While all of that I just said may seem like it's true, trust me when I tell you it's not. No matter who you are or what you've done or how you feel like it's impacted the way people see you and your ability to influence others, there is a way for things to be different. There is a way to find the influence that you think you lost forever. And to see the truth in this, we're going to look at the life of one of the most important people in the history of the Christian faith, a guy named Peter. Now, Peter was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. And the disciples were a group of guys who followed Jesus. They learned from him. They lived closely with him during his time on earth when he did his ministry. But Peter wasn't just another disciple. Peter was actually one of the 3 men who had the closest relationship with Jesus. He was considered to be one of Jesus' most trusted friends. Peter absolutely loved Jesus. And when Jesus left the earth after his death and his resurrection, Peter became one of the men who carried Jesus' message and spread Christianity around the world in the early church. And when Christians talk about Peter now, they talk about all the amazing things that he did to grow the church and to see more and more people end up believing in Jesus. They talk about what big and bold and amazing faith he had. They talk about his influence. But the interesting part of Peter's story is that Peter wasn't always the great guy that we know him to be. There was another man by the name of Luke, who was another disciple of Jesus. And Luke tells us a story that is a little bit different than what a lot of people know of Peter. This amazing leader with so much influence at the church at one point did something so bad that he almost lost it all. So where we pick up in today's story, Jesus had just been arrested and was about to be put on trial for his life. This was the beginning of the end for Jesus, or so everyone thought. And because they followed Jesus so closely, the disciples were afraid that maybe this was the beginning of the end for them as well. If Jesus had been arrested and his life was on the line, wouldn't it be safe to say that it was the same for them, for the people that were closest to him? And so as all of this unfolded, Peter followed Jesus to find out exactly where he had been taken. But because Peter was afraid for his own life, Peter hid himself in the crowd. He tried to blend in so that people wouldn't notice him as a follower and a friend of Jesus. And so in Luke chapter 22, we see this. A servant girl saw him, Peter, seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him," Jesus. But he denied it. "Woman," Peter said, "I don't know him." And so what we just saw was that one of the most trusted friends, loyal followers, and closest servants of Jesus just lied about being all of those things. He denied even knowing Jesus at all. This is like your best friend who knows all of your secrets. Maybe is first on your Snapchat list, is the number one person in your group that you text constantly, and they totally dropped you in front of everybody. I don't know about you, but that's certainly not the way I would think that one of the most influential leaders in the Christian faith would act. Shouldn't a guy who is so important in the history of the church be a guy who stood up for what he believed in and used his influence for good no matter what? Well, as much as I hate to say it, while this story is already bad enough, it's about to get worse. You see, later in the story, 2 more people came up to Peter in the crowd and asked him if he knew Jesus. And 2 more times, Peter denied knowing him. Right then and there, you'd think that the potential for Peter to ever have any influence as a Christian would be lost. After all, he denied knowing the guy who all of the Christian faith centers on. So how could somebody who does that ever gain back the influence that they lost? Well, it's simple. Jesus. You see, Jesus doesn't allow our mistakes to be the end of our story. Did Peter mess up? Absolutely. Did he feel awful about it? Definitely. You see, Luke went on to tell us that Peter went outside and wept. He cried over what he had done. He knew just how big and bad and costly those lies were. Not just for his influence, but also to his relationship with Jesus. But that's the thing about Jesus. Jesus doesn't see our mistakes the same way that we do. Jesus knows our sins are forgiven. And when we come to Jesus honestly, he offers us the forgiveness that we need to start over. Then we can begin gaining back the influence that we thought was gone for good. And that's exactly what he did for Peter. As you probably know, the story didn't seem like it ended all that well at first. Jesus was killed, and his followers, including Peter, didn't really know what to do next. They were afraid, they were unsure, they were lost, they had no leader. But then 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead. He came back to life. And the first thing that he did was to find his friends and his followers. And that included Peter. In another account of Jesus' life, the book of John, we find out exactly what Jesus said to Peter when they reunited. So in John chapter 21, we see this. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." With his very first question, Jesus was giving Peter a chance to change the story, to right the wrong that he had done, to be more than his mistakes, and to gain back his influence. And this time around, Peter got it right. 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loved him, and 3 times Peter confirmed his love for Jesus. He said one "I love you" for every time that he denied Jesus. And Jesus' response? It wasn't a call to take care of his actual sheep. Instead, it was actually a command to take care of the people who will follow Jesus. In the same way that a sheep needs a shepherd as their leader, believers in Jesus follow him. So by asking Peter to feed his lambs, Jesus was actually asking Peter to take care of his followers. He was asking Peter to tap back into his influence and use it to change the world through the message of Jesus. Jesus saw Peter as so much more than his mistakes. And the good news is that he sees us in the same exact way. No matter what we've done in the past, we have permission to love and follow Jesus right here in the present. Our mistakes and our sins have been paid for. We can freely ask God for the forgiveness Jesus brought for us. And because we are forgiven, we can move forward on a new path, step by step, gaining back the influence that we have felt like we once lost. And so as we wrap up, remember this. Jesus doesn't allow our mistakes to be the end of our story. Just like Peter, you can receive grace and forgiveness. How your story has gone before doesn't have to be the way it goes in the future. You could take a step towards Jesus and a step toward regaining some of the influence that you feel like you might have lost. And so to start that, I want you to do 3 things. First, I want you to ask yourself what may be causing you to lose your influence. Take a minute to think about the choices that you might be making, whether they're big or small, that are impacting your ability to influence others for good. Is it the person you're dating? Is it the things that you post on social media? Is it the way that you speak to other people? Is it your attitude on the sports field? Is it the party that you went to last weekend? All of these secret behaviors that you think nobody knows about. Whatever it is, acknowledge what big or small choices might be chipping away at your influence. Second, confess that to God. Whatever you identified, be honest with God about it. Tell him what you're struggling through and ask him to help you overcome it. Ask for his forgiveness and honestly and genuinely believe that you have received it. Let that moment right there be the first step in rewriting your story of influence. And lastly, take one step in the right direction. Take one small step toward gaining back the influence that you think you may have lost. Maybe that means apologizing to someone you wronged, or putting up boundaries in a relationship, or changing the way that you talk to other people, or even asking your small group or your small group leader to help you stay on the right path. And so with all of that being said, this week I want you to take one small step in the right direction. And next week, take another. Remember that those small steps over time will lead to a bigger and better influence in the long run. Have a good week, guys.